Hello and welcome to this episode of Happy Baking. In this episode, I want to shine a light on a very special pastry that I personally feel does not get enough love, at least in the US where I live. I'll be making Viennoise Au Chocolat, or Chocolate Vienna Bread. This individually portioned bread is made from a soft dough that's studded with chocolate. It's sort of shaped into a mini baguette. It's buttery, soft, and just sweet enough. In my mind, it is truly a perfect pastry. I feel like chocolate croissants are held on a pedestal in so many places. And I have to admit, I don't know that I've ever seen a Viennoise Chocolat anywhere in the US. Have you? If you have, let me know in the comments because I want to go to there. When I'm traveling, if I see this pastry, I am immediately dropping everything to pick one up. I'm obsessed. And in the rare special occasion that I get to have one that is still warm, I'm going to find myself a little park bench and I'm going to take a proper moment and give this tasty treat my full attention. All of this to say, this bread is special. I think more folks should know about it, and I want to eat it warm more often, so I'm gonna make it here in my very own kitchen. If you love chocolate croissants, you'll love these, and best of all, they are so much easier to make at home. In this episode, I'll teach you how to mix, rise, shape, and bake your own Viennoise Chocolat so you can experience this very perfect pastry for yourself. It's going to be an extremely chocolatey episode, and I can't wait. So let's get baking. Oh, hello. I'm Professor Erin Jeanne McDowell, and I'm here to talk a little bit about this bread. In pastry school, we spend a significant amount of time studying classic viennoiserie. This is a French word that literally means things from Vienna. This term sort of covers things that are somewhere between bread baking, boulangerie, and pastry making, pâtisserie. This includes things like Danish, brioche, and other yeast-raised pastries. We study this in depth in pastry school, and I was recently talking about my one and only visit to Vienna when I was freshly graduated. It's truly one of the most magical places I've ever visited, and I could cry thinking about it. Or maybe that's the fact that I'm wearing glasses that aren't for me. It's a baker's bucket list destination, for sure. As I gushed, my colleague, an American, so am I, but you know, said they didn't realize Vienna was such a pastry hub. But in fact, while many folks, particularly in the US, associate some of these types of pastries with France and French baking techniques, there are so many incredible pastries and desserts that originated in Austria or from Austrian chefs. Many famous desserts we know and love today have roots in Vienna. Things like Berliners or filled donuts, strudel, and even specific well-known cakes or torts, such as Soccer Tort, a chocolate cake filled or topped with apricot jam and glazed in chocolate. Or Linzer Tort, a soft, nut-based tort filled with fruit with a signature lattice top. The shape of a croissant is even said to have some roots in Austria, with some saying Marie Antoinette brought her love of kipferl, a crescent-shaped yeasted roll, with her when she moved to France. The French adapted and refined this concept and ultimately created the croissant we know and love today. In this episode, I will be making a style of bread simply known as Vienna bread. It's a soft, yeast-raised dough enriched with sugar, butter, and eggs, which helps to give it a fluffy texture. I'm gonna change out of this. Let's get baking. Let's talk about how to mix this dough. You want to mix it the day before you actually want to make the bread because this has sort of an elongated rise time, but it's worth it. It pays off in flavor and texture later. This is an enriched dough that is mixed using a mixing method known as the intense mixing method. It gets its name from the lengthier total mixing time that makes a fairly strong dough and ultimately produces a tighter interior crumb structure. I'll start by mixing the dry ingredients together in the bowl of an electric mixer fitted with the dough hook attachment. I'm gonna start with all the dry ingredients except the yeast and just mix them together until they're combined, about 30 seconds. So first, bread flour, dry milk. If you're familiar with my recipes, this is one of my favorite ingredients to put in any soft bread. It really makes a huge difference. We've got some granulated sugar. It's not as much as you might think. Really, the sweetness of this bread comes from the chocolate later. And then finally, some fine sea salt. I'll mix that on low speed just to bring it together, like I said, just about 30 seconds. Okay, perfect. Now I'm gonna add my instant yeast. I'm just gonna mix that for a moment until it's incorporated. I just wanna kind of start to spread the yeast through the mixture. Now we're gonna add the liquid ingredients. And there's a couple interesting things about this here. We're using cold liquid and cold eggs. This is partially because this has a longer total rise time, so we don't really need to heat it up. So the milk is going in cold, the eggs are cold from the fridge, and that's one of the things I like about this recipe is because you can decide to make it and you don't necessarily have to have that advanced preparation, and it really is basically just dump everything into a bowl and mix it together. So first the milk and the eggs. I'll mix the dough on low speed until it begins to come together to form sort of a shaggy dough, about 3 minutes. Okay, great, it's been 3 minutes, and as you can see, it has come together to form a dough, but it is a very shaggy mixture. It's not super smooth. So now I wanna raise the speed to medium and mix for 4 minutes more. And at the end of this mix time, the dough should be fairly smooth. But first, a good scrape of the hook, the bowl, the whole shebang. Okay, the dough definitely looks a lot smoother. I gave the bowl and the hook a good scrape, and now it's time to start adding the butter. So this is a very similar technique to brioche, but this really isn't a brioche ratio. So we're adding a lot less butter than I would typically add to a brioche, but we are doing the same kind of mixing method. This intense mixing method where we're going to be mixing at a medium speed, adding the butter a little bit at a time to incorporate each addition before adding the next. And the process is gonna take about 7 to 8 minutes of additional mixing time total. You don't wanna rush it. You don't wanna just start throwing all the butter in. It's not going to emulsify well. It's not going to mix well. Okay, the dough is already getting so much smoother, and I've added half the butter. So always at this point, I like to stop and scrape the sides and the base of the bowl really well before continuing to add the rest. All right, back on medium speed to add the rest of the butter. Okay, all the butter is incorporated. And now we've got a super sticky dough because it is so enriched. I'm gonna give it one more good scrape. And just when you thought mixing was over, guess what? It's not. We're gonna mix on medium speed until the dough is completely smooth, 2 minutes more. And then I'll transfer it to a large greased bowl and cover it with plastic wrap for the first rise. When you scrape a bread dough, one of the things we learned in large scale professional bakeries is to actually flip the dough all the way over, because especially when the mixer bowl is conical like this, there's a real tendency for whatever's at the bottom to not ever fully mix in. So give that bread a good flip if you want, in addition to scrape. 2 minutes more on medium speed, and then we'll be ready for the first rise. Okay, the dough is so smooth now. It's sticky, but not so sticky that it's sticking to my hands. That's just because it's so enriched. So I'm gonna form it into kind of a roughly round shape, transfer it to a greased bowl for the first rise. Let the dough rise at room temperature until visibly puffy. It will not quite double in size. It'll take 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. Remember, it'll take a little less time in a warm room and a little bit more time in a colder one. All right, after that first rise, I'll see you back because that's when we're gonna add the chocolate. Okay, my dough has risen. It's nice and puffy. And now I'm going to add the chocolate into the dough. There's a reason that we don't add the chocolate in until it's had a little bit of a rise. Adding it at this stage allows the dough to get a jump start on fermentation without weighing it down with even more enrichments, of which chocolate is a pretty significant enrichment. So I'll fold it in now and then let it do its next bulk ferment. And it'll take a little bit longer because it'll have that chocolate inside. To do this, we'll fold in the chocolate. So I'm gonna grab my bowl scraper and I'll start by kind of deflating the dough a little bit just with my hand. Ooh, that's very satisfying. I'm gonna sprinkle some of the chocolate over the surface. And this is something I wanna talk about right away, because in general, I am a fan of using chopped chocolate in recipes because the stabilizers in chocolate chips kind of can be problematic for me. They make it not melt as well. There's a lot of reasons. So typically I'm always telling you on Happy Baking, chop your chocolate, it's worth it. But in this recipe, the stabilizers actually kind of help. They help ensure that they're sort of studded throughout, and any that are on the exterior sort of stay looking cute. This is one time I kind of like using chocolate chips, but I still recommend looking for the highest quality chocolate chips possible because this is a time to use good chocolate since it takes such a starring role in the recipe. My favorites are Valrhona or Guittard or Callebaut, but if you can't find those, another one that's commonly in grocery stores that's a little higher quality than just a typical chocolate chip would be Ghirardelli. After I've sprinkled about a third of the chocolate chips into the bowl, I'm gonna use the bowl scraper to scoop under the dough and fold over. This is sort of the same as any time a recipe asks you to fold the dough. We're just gonna use that to incorporate the chocolate chips instead of just adding strength to the dough. So I'll give it a few good folds, and once I can't see any chocolate in the bowl anymore, I'll sprinkle another third of the chocolate chips on and repeat the process. When all the chocolate has been incorporated, cover the bowl and transfer it to the refrigerator to rise for at least 10 hours and up to 24 hours. That's one of the things I really love about this dough is there is a lot of effort into the mixing, but then you can be a little bit flexible with when you actually want to bake it. All right, time to rise. Good morning, it's the next day, even though somehow I'm wearing the exact same outfit. I've removed the dough from the refrigerator and I'm gonna divide it into 12 even pieces. They should be about 120 grams each. And because this is an enriched dough, when it's cold from the fridge, it's pretty firm. And that's actually really helpful in the shaping process. First, I'm gonna do kind of a pre-shape for these rolls. Pre-shaping is one of the 12 official steps of bread baking that is sometimes skipped in bread recipes at home. Not always, but sometimes, only because bread recipes already feel long and tedious, so people don't always want to include that step. They don't want to make people wait any longer. But pre-shaping basically just helps to ensure that after we've shaped it, it gets a little bit of time to relax before we actually go to do the final shaping. In this case, the pre-shaping is just to round each piece of dough lightly. After I round each of these, I'll just let them rise on a lightly floured surface covered with a clean kitchen towel for 15 to 20 minutes. It's really more of a rest time than it is a fermentation time, but it'll really help make the shaping a little bit easier when we go to do the final shape. When I'm rounding dough, what I'm really using is kind of this outside portion of my hand. So you're sort of cupping the dough in your hand and moving around. This dough is kind of sticky, so it can be helpful to keep your bowl scraper handy nearby just to make sure if you need a little help scraping it right off the surface. All right, in 20 minutes, I'm gonna shape these into their final form. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes, and so I'm ready to shape my final little rolls here. I've lined some baking sheets with parchment paper. Typically I would bake on larger baking sheets, but I have a little proof box that I love. It's actually a countertop oven that has a proof box setting. It's really awesome. In fact, we should probably link to it in the video description below in case anybody's interested. It really makes bread baking so wonderful, and it also has like an air fryer setting, and it's a great tool. But these pans fit a little bit better into that countertop oven. So this is more like a quarter sheet pan, so I'm gonna only be able to do a few on each one. And we're basically going to be making a baguette shape. You can lightly flour your work surface as much as you need to make sure that this dough doesn't stick, but because it's still pretty cool, it is often fairly easy to shape without using a ton of flour. And I always want to point out that when it comes to shaping bread, using a lot of flour can actually really hinder the process. It can prevent a good seal from forming. It can actually work against you in some ways. So use what you need to prevent sticking. But when I say a lightly floured surface, that's what I mean. And if you can get away without using any, that's even better. To start, I'm going to just use my fingertips to press the bread a little bit flatter. And then starting with the portion that's a little bit further away from me, I'm going to start lifting it up and folding it onto itself. Each time pressing really firmly with my fingertips to seal it. And I'll keep doing this process 2 or 3 times until I almost make it to the other side. And when there's just a little bit of a tail left in that shape, I'm gonna fold it over one more time and use the heel of my hand to seal it really well. So again, once more folding it over and pressing really firmly with the heel of my hand. Okay, already you can see I have kind of a baguette shape here. So now I'm just gonna use my fingertips to sort of roll it back and forth to smooth it out and also to slightly taper the ends. And that's how we get our little Vienna bread shape. So cute. Chocolate studded all throughout. I'll transfer that to my baking sheet and I'm gonna shape all the other pieces. Before I let my Vienna bread go in for its final rise, I'm gonna use a lame or a very sharp knife to score each mini loaf. If you bake a lot of bread, this may seem unusual because you usually don't score until after the bread has risen. These pastries are traditionally scored with many small lines and it's sort of their signature look. However, it can be really difficult to score enriched doughs when they are soft, warm, and especially when they're puffy from fermenting. But scoring them right after shaping actually makes it pretty easy. I'm gonna aim for somewhere between 5 to 7 short diagonal cuts across the surface of each piece of dough, again, sort of mimicking a baguette look. If the chocolate gets in your way at any point, just sort of work around it. If you can't get a full score mark there, it's okay, or you can kind of score in between chocolate chips. Loosely cover the surface of each tray with greased plastic wrap or a clean kitchen towel and let them rise until they're noticeably puffy and double in size. This can take 1 hour and 30 minutes to 2 hours and 30 minutes. And the reason it takes so much time is because this dough is so heavily enriched. Enriched doughs take longer to rise because all those enrichments really weigh them down and slow them down. And you don't want to bake these too soon or they're going to be dense. All right, I'm gonna take these to my little proof box and we'll come back when they're perfectly puffy. I've got my pastries proofing, and the way that I'll know that they're done is when I press them gently with my fingertip, it should make an indentation, but then the dough should begin to slowly bounce back to its original position. If the indentation just stays, that typically means it's almost overproofed, and if it doesn't really make an indentation, that's a sign of underproofing. Towards the end of rise time, preheat the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 205 degrees Celsius with the oven racks in the upper and lower third of the oven. Uncover your Vienna bread and brush the surface of each piece lightly with egg wash. Once you put the pans into the oven, you immediately want to reduce the oven temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. This essentially gives the bread an immediate burst of heat right when it first goes in. This is gonna help with oven spring. But then for the rest of baking, it can bake at a gentler temperature. Bake the pastries until the exterior is deeply golden brown and the inside has an internal temperature of at least 195 degrees Fahrenheit or 95 degrees Celsius. It'll take about 12 to 15 minutes. My Vienna breads are all out of the oven and I was sure to let them cool at least 10 minutes before diving in. You can also let them cool completely and serve them at room temperature. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the variants in my bread because I want to be honest, I almost stopped filming to remake these and make them a little bit prettier because we do have another swap dough waiting and rising in the fridge. But that's not the point of happy baking. The point of happy baking is to make things that are delicious, that we love to eat, and that we get to share with other people. And I know for a fact that even if some of these are wonky, they are super delicious and I can't wait to dive in. And if I had a little bit of an error in any of mine, you might experience that at home too. So let's just talk about some of the things that happened. First, in front of me, I have some of the better shaped Vienna bread, but they're a little bit dark because I forgot to lower the temperature when I baked them. So I put them into a 400-degree oven and I forgot to lower it down to 350. As a result, they're a bit darker, but when I squeeze them, I can still feel that they're plenty soft, and I was still able to bake them to the correct internal temperature. So they just unfortunately have a bit more of an outer crust than their cousins on these other baking sheets. The ones on the other baking sheets, some of them are shaped okay, some of them aren't. The dough for this bread, because it's so enriched and we shape it fairly cold, it feels sometimes like you've really formed a nice seal with that cold dough. But look, this seal opened right up. I didn't even see it. The score marks are over on the side because that seal opened up. Is that gonna make this piece any less delicious? No, it is not. This is like, I can feel how soft and pillowy this is in my hands, and I honestly cannot wait to eat these. I mostly am pointing out these errors only because I really want to do Vienna bread justice. This is a pastry that I love so much when I'm traveling, and I want to make sure that people in the US understand what it should look like, what it can look like. But of course, like all baked goods, there's a lot of variance. You've seen chocolate croissants made many ways, I'm sure. So the most important thing is we want a nice golden brown color. Those score marks are pretty typical of Vienna bread. So this is a good example of what the ones I've seen are kind of like, just these visible score marks that end up showing a lighter color underneath that outer crust. And I just love it. Normally there's quite a few of those little score marks. And with that said, let's talk about some of the ways you can serve Vienna bread. Obviously, it's delicious all on its own, especially if you can eat a fairly fresh one still pretty warm. But here's another few ways I have seen it served, mostly online. I truly don't know if any of these are traditional, and if you happen to know, be sure to let me know in the comments because I want to learn everything I can about this because I really, really love this pastry so much, if you haven't been able to tell. So one of the ways I've seen it served before is cut in half and a little whipped cream piped inside and maybe some sliced strawberries. And that's a little bit more like a full dessert. Another way that it's commonly served is with some salted butter spread on the inside. And I know that seems a little crazy because there's already so much butter in the dough itself, but I've seen it served that way a lot, and it's kind of a nice little sandwichy sort of snack. So I think I'll try one that way, but I also want to try one plain. Yeah, very, very soft, pillowy. I'm gonna go ahead and try some with a little, the end piece doesn't have any butter, so I'm gonna go ahead and try that first. It's so good. No lamination, but it's so light. The chocolate bits on the outside have gotten a little crunchy, crispy, the way that exposed chocolate pieces can do. And the chocolate on the inside is just so soft and incredible. Okay, let's do a buttery bite. I feel like I need privacy. Holy bleep! It's delicious! And cue the park bench on a sunny day in France, please. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Happy Baking. I seriously just had like a religious experience eating this bread. It is so good, and even if my shaping wasn't totally perfect today, I really hope you try this recipe. It's one of my favorites that I've developed in years, and they are so much fun to make, and they are so insanely delicious to eat. You can find my recipe for this Viennoise Au Chocolat linked in the video description below or on my website, erinjeannemcdowell.com. And if this video inspires you to bake, please tag me on social media because I love to see what you're making in your kitchens. You can find me at eMcDowell on Instagram, at Erin Jeanne McDowell on TikTok, and as Erin Jeanne McDowell on Facebook. Until next time, wishing you lots of chocolate-studded happy baking. That was so good.